Welcome, zombie fans, to this week's episode of Reanimated. I am H.A. Conrad, here with my intrepid co-host, Stuart Tiffin. Hello, Stuart.
Good day.
Good day. We are on our 75th episode. Yay! And we're going to have our usual tidbits of Zed-related news, and we're also doing a review of a book which I quite liked. I'm going to give that spoiler away about my opinion, but I thought it was an excellent book called The Girl with All the Gifts by M.R. Carey. Before we get to that, just a reminder to our audience that, and a thank you to our sponsors, Squarespace. This episode, like all episodes of Reanimated, is brought to you by Squarespace, which is the all-in-one platform that helps you create your own website. It has great customized tools so you can make your website look like your own. Our friends at Squarespace have given us an offer code for you first-time users, so throw in the word zombie, not case-sensitive, and you'll get 10% off your first purchase. So thank you, Squarespace, for being our wonderful sponsors. So, Stuart, what is up in the lineup today for zombie news?
Okay, so first up, we've got a bit of a crossover chamber event in the realm of Super Fantastic Nerd Hour. I feel like I'm the one who drops the name of your other podcast more than you do.
Sometimes when I forget which podcast I'm on, that is not
true.
true.
That's true. But so this is another insect. We've talked about a lot of these, but then nature, as it turns out, can be terrifying, and there's a potential for the book that we're reading today to increase the level of that terror.
Indeed.
And so nature just reminds us once again, like knocks on the window, hey, I'm still terrifying, with the Dementor wasp, which is a horrible creature, or perhaps it's amazing because it actually kills cockroaches. It turns cockroaches into zombies. H.A., could you elaborate further?
So basically what this wonderful wasp does is that it takes its cockroach victim, which, I don't normally have a lot of sympathy for cockroaches. In this case, I actually did. So it goes to its hapless victim, kind of stings it with a toxin, and it makes it a zombie in the sense of probably more of the Haitian zombies, because it's just kind of passive, hanging out there. What the venom does is it blocks the neurotransmitters of the cockroach, so it's kind of like it's just paralyzed. So it can't do anything. It kind of like tries to flail around, but the wasp basically can just take it off into its little terrifying hellhole and eat it at its leisure.
So this is just like I feel like there are other things that do this, and I'm blanking on all of them.
Well, honestly,
like a snake bite or a spider bite.
Snakes do this too. And then I think there's like, I want to say frogs do this. Maybe some frogs do this as well.
And definitely spiders.
Right. But, I think the idea that the wasps are kind of scary and can fly around immediately makes me think of kind of crazy, some sort of like a sci-fi movie with really large wasps doing this to humans. And maybe that's why it sounds scary. And this has actually gotten recently has gotten play because J.K. Rowling tweeted something about this and called it like the Dementor wasp or something. So there you go.
Great. Now she can just name animals. That's fantastic.
Right. But in any case, there you have it, and in line with our book review today. So
very much. In other very exciting news, sort of. I mean, it's hard to be excited about something coming in 2017, but the World War Z sequel release date was announced, and it looks like Brad Pitt is coming back. And I think that we're all holding our thumbs, as the Germans would say, that it's not going to suck.
Well, and there were a few little rumors out there that he was being a little bit, he wanted the script to be better for this, I guess.
But where do you even start?
I know. It's all, you pretty much have to create something entirely new.
I feel like retroactively they should go back and change the name of the first one and then just have this one be like, this is the second of that movie that we have changed the name of the first one to.
Right, but I am a little bit hopeful, slightly hopeful, given how he was dragging his feet, that maybe some things happened to make this a better film. So, we'll see. And you know, I think that was sort of fine for the way it was, but not anything like World War Z. But hey, maybe they're going to be able to bring it back and bring back some of the elements that we're talking about if the passage of time is enough. So maybe we'll see some of those cool things that we saw in the book.
Well, we're definitely looking at like what 5 or 6 years between production, right?
So hopefully Brad Pitt's youthful good looks will stay around that long. But, you know, they could also be explained away by his ruggedness can be explained away by the horrible things he's gone through during what the world has been going through in the meantime. So we'll see. But I'm curious to hear a little bit more about it. Again, I think this is going to be a little bit like Fear the Walking Dead, where we hear very tiny little tidbits all leading up to this, and they don't really yet know what they're doing. So stay tuned, audience. Next up is just a silly little thing I saw on Google Play, and it's a zombie parking game. Did you see this, Stuart?
I have seen only the synopsis.
Right. I kind of I didn't actually play this. I just kind of enjoyed their little advertising. But it's a zombie car parking simulator. And basically, this is for you to test your parking skills in the event of a zombie outbreak. And so you get to drive around a post-apocalypse city, you know, and you can have your choice of different cars. And then, you know, one of the little like sort of screenshots of the game is like real zombified city, like landscape. It's just kind of a tongue-in-cheek thing. But I could see myself getting into that on the train, maybe, but not really as a regular game.
Yeah, it's pretty dumb. I don't have any real opinions about it.
All right. Well, there you have it. Stuart's opinion. And I know a moment all of you zombie fans have been waiting for on Netflix streaming right now is the film Zombievers. And we talked a little bit about this when the trailer first came out. Perhaps a subject for a future show, Stuart, or maybe just sort of like I don't know if we have to dedicate a whole show to this, but we should maybe watch it and comment on it.
I feel like you're right. I think it's something that probably just has to happen.
Yeah, maybe just a footnote. Who knows?
Yeah.
But in any case, it is, you know, it's up there. So if you'd like to see it, go for it. And next up is actually more Fear the Walking Dead news. So what do we got here, Stuart?
So I figured we don't talk about this every week, and yet some new details have been emerging. Nothing like earth-shattering. A few new casting announcements, a release date or a release month anyway, and another trailer or teaser. But to even call it that is doing all other teasers and trailers a disservice. So first up, we got 4 new actors announced for the cast. Lorenzo, like none of these people do I know except for Ruben Blades, who I kind of have loved ever since Predator 2. Mm-hmm. Lorenzo Henry, who has credits from Star Trek as Chris Manawa, who is Cliff Curtis's son in the series, and he's indignant towards his father over his parents' divorce is like his motivation. We've got Elizabeth Rodriguez, who is that young man's mother, and I guess so not married to Cliff Curtis, but his ex-wife perhaps. And then Mercedes Mason, who we don't really know much about except that she's going to be a young woman, and she is going to be the daughter of Ruben Blades' character Daniel. And are you familiar with his work at all?
I don't think I am.
He used to do a commercial on TV about the importance of reading and potentially bilingual, but I don't remember. Either way, he's just a cool dude. And so what I also like about all the casting decisions made so far is it's pretty good and diverse. I think there's only a couple of white folk in the cast so far. In the Kim Dickens and maybe her 2 kids, or one of her kids. I forget. Either way, so it's pretty good and diverse so far, which is important in a place like L.A., which is where they're setting it. So. It's nice to see. Of course, you know, Walking Dead has always had a pretty good, diverse cast, so it's not surprising.
Right. I mean, I like, I'm excited to see some of these new casting announcements. I feel like I've seen Ruben Blades on a couple of things. Like he's one of those people that pops up here and there, but I didn't remember him till you had mentioned it. He does have a very cool name, though.
He does have a cool name. Yep.
And then, the trailer that came up, I got a little bit confused by it because at first I didn't realize it was for sort of all the AMC things that are coming up. And I got really excited for a moment because I thought Lee Pace was actually going to be in Fear the Walking Dead.
Right. What show is he in on AMC?
He's in *Halt and Catch Fire*, and that's sort of like loosely based on I don't want to call it the birth of Silicon Valley, but that's kind of what it is.
That's right, yeah.
All those things, but he is like I like him as an actor, so I was like, wait, he's on very disappointing in like a few seconds span time. But the teaser is not, I feel like they should be doing a little bit more to tease us up. There was just very quick little flashes, and the stills are in the link that we'll put up in the show notes, to basically just give you no more information than you already have. People running in fear, and that's about it.
Or looking around.
Or looking around.
There's not much to it.
Right. But hey, it's coming up. We'll eventually see it and review it. So, hey, at least it's being released. I haven't seen anything about the release date being delayed yet. So,
true. And 6-episode season, just like the first season of The Walking Dead, its parent show. So that should be interesting.
Mm-hmm. We'll see what they fit in there. Hopefully it starts out with the same kind of excitement and moves the plot forward a bit. So we'll see, and we'll have more information on that later.
We hope.
All right, we hope. So without further ado, are you ready to move into our review of the week?
Yes, I am. The Girl with All the Gifts by M.R. Carey, British author, was published in June 2014 and got its movie deal, I feel like, almost at the same time it was published. Is that the impression you get?
Either almost at the same time or very quickly thereafter. Now, M.R. Carey is actually the pen name of Mike Carey. Mike Carey is a pretty well-known comic book, graphic novel writer. He's been involved in like tons of different projects. There's honestly so many to name. If you look at his sort of his list of accolades, they are very, very long. He had a little bit of a stint with Hellblazer, which I thought was pretty good. But, just involved like in a ton of stuff. And so it's interesting that he picked a different pen name, but maybe he felt like M.R. Carey was cooler. And he actually has a couple of other novels under his belt. So maybe people saw this sort of in the initial round and were like, this would make a great film. So I would say if you haven't read this book, stop this podcast and read the book and then come back and listen to what we have to say about it, because there is no way for us to review this book without spoiling it for everybody. So
there is, but it would be a very short discussion.
Right.
It's probably, I don't know.
And I do recommend this. So I do think if you're into this kind of story, like zombie stories and things like that, do yourself a favor and pick this up. I think it's great. But that's my only push for it. Do you have a same feeling, Stuart?
You want me to say how I feel about
I do.
I think you have an inkling, HA, because I texted or emailed you the day after I stayed up until 2:30 or 3:30 in the morning just because I couldn't put it down, and I finished it a week before we were due to review it.
Which is, it's impressive. I was not expecting that out of you. I had an inkling, but I just wanted you to put it on the record. That's all.
Yeah, this book grabbed me and just brought me with it, like I could not put it down. All 450 odd pages, I just plowed through it in 2 days, which it's not like unknown. I sometimes do that, but it has to be good, and this was
excellent. So here it is, the last time we're going to say it. If you don't want to be spoiled with this book, you should not listen past this point. But if you do want to listen past this point, we're going to go ahead and talk about it. So I also read this book. I hadn't started it when you did because I thought I had a little. I didn't expect you to finish it so quickly, admittedly.
Yeah.
But after you said that, I started reading it and I finished it. I finished it pretty quickly. I think I finished it in about a day. And it is very, very interesting. It definitely grabs on. I mean, there's a couple of minor criticisms I have with it, but overall, I found it to be one of the more enjoyable zombie sort of stories that I've read in a very long time, from a novel point of view. So the idea behind this, and I thought it was like a really interesting way to go about it. So the zombie plague in this particular story is based upon, and people who have listened to this show before have heard us talk about it, but there is basically like an insect fungus, this fungus that uses insects to propagate itself. And specifically, it uses ants to do this. And what it'll do, it'll infect an ant, and the ant is there, it's compelled to basically find a place to attach itself. Parts of this fungus kind of take over its body, like grow these sort of crazy things out of it, and then sort of I don't even know, like kind of disperse the fungus or like all over the place so that it can continue to do this. So it basically affects this living thing's behavioral patterns in order to propagate itself, which is kind of creepy.
Yeah.
And it, to see it in nature, as Stuart was saying earlier, nature is freaking scary, and this is a very scary thing. And what this author has done is basically taken this idea and made it into a book, and a what if this thing happened and was able to happen to humans instead. I liked a lot of the narration as it was taking place, because you're seeing it through the eyes of this girl, Melanie, who's the main character of the book, or one of the main characters, I suppose.
Yeah, it definitely the perspective changes chapter
Here and
to
there,
chapter.
yeah, it does. But Melanie is kind of the first character you get to know, and the way that the author unveils what the storyline is, I thought was very good. He didn't take too long to do it. And Melanie is basically a kid who has this organism in her, but she's still functional. Like, she can learn and she can talk. However, she's on this military base because they're kind of studying all the kids that are like this. But they take a lot of precautions. Like, all the kids are kind of like clamped down. I like the rules that they apply to this particular story. Like, they have humans have developed this sort of cream to cover up their smell so that the zombie kids can't smell them. The kids have changed a lot of things about their biology. Like, they only can really process protein, so they're eating like grubs attached to their little wheelchair things. So there were some really cool things that he came up with here that I thought were just very unique and not the normal tropes. I mean, the normal tropes, but kind of like switched over to something original.
Yeah, I can see a lot of source material in this story, and and so when I was reading it, I was immediately, well, not immediately, but ultimately reminded of the book I Am Legend.
Yes, yeah, no, it definitely has that kind of feel about it, and I think
by the end, it's basically the same kind of end as I Am Legend in a lot of ways, although approached differently, of course. And then towards the beginning, I really had this Day of the Dead vibe, because they're on this military base, and things are kind of falling apart, and that's this was the coolest part of you've already kind of touched on it, but the coolest part about the point of view of the writer. It's written first person singular, and this is a pretty normal way to approach narrative at this point, I feel like. But every so often you come across an author who's like, I'm going to write in the second person, the weirdest book I've ever read was written in the second person singular. I don't even remember the name of the book, but it was about a near future thing, and there were 5 different characters, and each of them said you, or no, each of them was you. It was ridiculous.
that's tough.
It was really hard, and like some of them are men, some of them are women. Forget about it. So this one, it's first person singular, but it doesn't feel weird. You don't have any kind of like problem jumping from one to the other because they are written differently. Not like Faulkner written differently with like
Right.
no punctuation for some of them, just normal. But their outlook is very different in each case. And Melanie is a great place to start because she's so positive and naive and like a blank slate to begin with. That she's a great introduction into this world, in my opinion. Even though she's describing negative stuff, her weird positive outlook is like a really cool way to be introduced to this to the kind of like hardships that she is put through.
Well, also, even the questions that she's having herself about what's going on with her, because she doesn't fully know. Like, there's a lot of mystery going on and questions that she has that she doesn't fully understand. So
Right.
even when, when she's having reactions because she's infested with this fungus, she doesn't even fully know, and she doesn't like the reactions she's having, but she has no
Right.
control over it.
And
So
it's showing instead of telling, right?
right.
As for the author, he's letting us see what's happening and draw our own conclusions, which as a very well trained zombie culture, we all know what's going on.
Right.
When she and it's based on smell, and when she smells living flesh, she has an uncontrollable reaction, and that's a great way to approach that. And then when the character perspective like jumps to someone else, like the character development is just so cool. Like Melanie only knows this
So
one guy
much. Yeah.
as Sergeant for the first few bunch of pages. He's just Sergeant and he's a dick.
Yep.
And then suddenly we're in Sergeant, we are him, and immediately he's more of a empathetic and understandable character.
Right, because you're revealing parts of the story and the plot through
And
his
yeah,
eyes.
and his doubts and his concerns, and that was just awesome. And the way, and then like jumping to Helen Justineau, same thing, except yeah, basically same thing. And Carolyn Caldwell even, who is probably, she's kind of the antagonist for the whole
Right.
story. She's probably the hardest one to empathize with, but
But
maybe
you can
that's probably the hardest character that the author tries to make understandable, but you still
right.
kind of get there,
Yeah, you get there, and she's hard to empathize with mainly because of her way of conveying her beliefs and very clearly having her singular objective. But you also still can understand why she's doing what she's doing. So
Yeah.
it's maybe you don't fully empathize with her, but you do get it. And if they had made her character slightly more sympathetic, that may have been a little bit more interesting, but I don't know exactly how you would have done that with her having to do the things that she has to do. Maybe she
Yeah.
would have felt a little worse about it, but her viewpoint in terms of looking at Melanie and the other kids like Melanie are very scientific.
It's
Uh,
very clinical, very detached, and no empathy. And
right.
it's tough. It's a bit of a tough sell that she'd be surrounded by all these other characters who are like kind of varying degrees of empathy. With Helen Justineau being like 100%
Right.
empathetic, and the sergeant being probably 75, because the way he deals with Justineau, even when everything is fine back at the base, he's still very accommodating to her
Right.
in a lot of ways. So it's a little bit of an odd choice to have someone like Caldwell be 0%
Right.
empathy.
Right. Like
It's
nothing.
it's a bit of a stereotype too, right? For like scientists who can't, like Professor Frankenstein from Day of the Dead, even, or Dr. Frankenstein. He has all he sees is the mission, or like the progress of science, and has no, kind of like no humanity, and that's a bit of an odd trope.
Stretch. Yeah, yeah, yeah. And I think, there may have been a couple of things within the plot of the story as we learn about this world that I would have liked to know a little bit more about. I mean, so you have the main characters all on this army base. They're trying to figure out, what happened, what this fungus is, and I'm going to try to pronounce it, and probably fail miserably. But it's Ophiocordyceps unilateralis. Is that about right?
That looks right to me.
So the idea is that this fungus basically jumped over to humans, and what we're seeing, like where this world is after all the the first wave of infection has gone by. So we have these little islands of humans that are still trying to figure it out. So you're left with humans that are not infected. The people that were sort of the initial waves of infection, which are the adults, and these are more of your typical zombie people. So they're out there. They just want to. They call them the hungries. They just want to eat humans. And then you have the kids like Melanie, who are a little bit of a different thing. They're they are infected with this, but they still are capable of interacting with humans.
I think it's also important to note that there are hungries that are kids that are
Right.
feral, or
Right.
like not like Melanie at all. People
Right.
who were infected when they were children
Right. So part
in
of
the
why,
wild.
so part of what they're trying to figure out is why Melanie and her colleagues,
Yeah.
so to speak, are different.
Why some kids are
Right.
this
Right.
way.
And and possibly finding a cure.
Melanie is also, and I had a hard time in the book kind of figuring out if she was a genius because of her infection or if she was just a genius already. Like, what did you land on that?
It was hard to say. I don't know. I think maybe she would have already been a genius because there is a like the other kids that are in her class, so to speak, not all of them are at her level.
Yeah, that's
So
at
I
least
think
the impression we get. Yeah.
that's the impression we get. I also thought that there was, especially toward the end, some implication that she might be the sergeant's child, or maybe that was just him. Like, maybe that explains why he was being so, like, sort of holding himself away from her for so long.
I'm pretty sure that's impossible
Yeah,
based on.
I agree, but there was that weird little, like, thing there, which I was like, really? Is that where they're going with this? Or are they just trying to explain why he's been so anti-Melanie the whole time? Maybe it was just hard for him because it reminded him of his own daughter. But it's,
Well, I mean, not to jump to the ultimate spoilery end,
Right.
but these kids are the product of hungries that have sex and have babies.
right.
So he can't be her father for that reason.
Was it hungries that have sex and have babies, or was it that the mother hungry was already pregnant?
And maybe that is one potential
Because
end, but I
that's
think
why-
they needed two. I think they needed two infected parents, and they got to this explanation kind of the long way by pointing out all these various hungries during their odyssey who are still performing acts as if they were alive, like pushing a pram or looking at photos and singing. And from those examples, the end, the conclusion that Caldwell came to was that they also were having sex and making the young hungries.
All right. Well, I didn't fully understand that, or I didn't fully get that was exactly where they were going. But hey, we can, that.
And I assume it's basically because this is like the propagation that the fungus is going for, right? It's because its
Right.
weird lifespan is just bizarre.
Right. And the other thing, I thought was very cool in sort of the way that they were telling the story was about this fungus, is that part of what Caldwell's objective is that she knows about the original lifespan of we'll call it unilateralist, because it's just easier to say it that way. But one of the things that it has several different stages of its lifespan. So the first is that it infects the ants. The second is that it kills off the ants, and the spores it's like a reproductive stage. And then there is a final stage which she is still looking to see and doesn't know exactly what it's going to be, but her thoughts are that if they don't find a cure for this really quickly, the rest of the humans that are left will be done because the spores will be airborne. So that's kind of an interesting part of the story that I really liked.
Yeah, and that part doesn't develop until the very late in the story.
No, but
Like,
it's
we don't
cool.
even you
It's
don't
such
even
a cool
see
thing.
one with the growth or like the final stage of the fungus where it kills the host.
Right.
You don't even see one of those until way late in the story.
Right, but I like that they
very-
kept that till the end. They
Well, it's very interesting. It's a great story arc, and it helps the third act kind of grow past the first two parts of the story. And it totally turns everything around, as a lot of third acts tend to do. Like, they introduce something new, but this is in line with where they were going.
Yeah.
So it feels very natural, and like I guess the yeah, everything narratively just it flows in this whole story because even the introduction of the bad guys, I guess, for the third act, the tribe of wild Melanies.
Right.
Even they're right in line because we already know about Melanie and her compatriots. So it makes sense that there are still wild ones that Sergeant Parks wasn't able to net.
Right.
And so yeah, it's
And
very
it is
cool.
kind of cool because they, outside of what they've been going through at the army base, this tribe of Melanies, as I'd like to call them, or Melanie-like creatures, they form their own little like behaviors and I don't want to call it culture, but I guess it is, and hunting patterns, and that's very different from the normal hungries. Like and because they can think and they have higher level thinking and planning capabilities, they're so terrifying.
Yeah.
So it's nice. It was kind of a nice thing because you don't meet them until very late in the book. So I thought
Oh, you're
that
you're
was
gonna
just a
love
nice
that part of
touch.
the movie when all the children get introduced.
Oh, I you know how I feel about that, Stuart.
So other things that I was definitely feeling as I was reading this in terms of influences. Have you ever seen a movie called Screamers?
No.
So it's a sci-fi movie from I guess the late '90s, probably, starring Peter Weller. Yeah, so he's the main actor. It's about an alien planet where humans are like two corporations or two factions of humans are in a war throughout the galaxy, and one of the tricks or weapons that they've introduced are these screamers. They are autonomous robots that live under the sand of this planet, and if you go outside without your genetic bracelet on, they will come after you and kill you. So, not to go to the whole synopsis of this movie, ultimately, him and one other guy leave their base to go and have a peace talk with the other faction, and shortly after leaving, they lose contact with their home base, and it turns out shenanigans ensue, and you're never really sure what's going on with their home base. And it's very similar to the feeling you get of Beacon, which is kind of like the last stand of humanity,
Mm-hmm.
which depending on which character is describing it, because Gallagher has some really negative shit to say about it. It's like it's a great place, or it's a total like it's a just terrible place where humanity is dying and like pickling in its own nasty juices. But if anybody's seen Screamers, I feel like there are definitely some parallels between the plot of this book and the plot of that film, even though it's robots versus zombies, and they do have a lot in common because eventually the robots learn how to make themselves look like humans, and you can't tell who's a screamer and who's it's crazy. It's a really good movie actually.
Cool.
So Beacon is a very cool element to this book that you never find out what's going on with Beacon. It turns out that even Sergeant Parks doesn't know he's lost contact with them 6 months before the plot of this book starts.
Mm.
And I love that kind of shit. That's like a great little
Yeah.
detail
Yeah.
that
No.
suddenly
Totally.
you're like, wait a second, are these the last four human beings?
Nice.
Or except for the Junkers. So yeah, either way, that was another influence that I definitely was vibing on. Firewalker, the episode of the X-Files, which deals with fungal influence on humans and turns them into homicidal maniacs, and then eventually bursts out of their throats in a weird asparagus phallic thing. It's very similar to this, honestly.
Yeah.
Like you get infected by this fungus, for whatever reason, you want to get close to someone right before you explode is kind of the plot of Firewalker.
So you can spread it.
Yeah, exactly. So you can spread it to the next person. And in this case, the Hungries want to bite you so that you then get the fungus in your bloodstream, and ultimately then grow the weird growth and spread spores. But you can't do it. I mean, like the weird way that the fungus is broken in this plot is also interesting. Like it can't.
Yeah.
The spores won't spread without a third party.
Right.
And they do try to. They find like Melanie for some reason. It's like it's like those things in the redwoods that only spread if they get struck by lightning or something.
Yeah.
Do you recall that?
There's like You mean like how they spread? Like
But
how
only with an external
right,
element,
they
right?
have to have like some kind of, and you know what it reminded me of, this external like heating element or event was like when they mentioned the lightning strikes, it reminds me of in the Sequoia National Park, they were trying to control forest fires for a really long time. And so if there were lightning strikes and things like that, they would get that stuff like totally taken care of really quickly. And then they realized that part of how the sequoias actually do like spread new seedlings and things like that is that like the seed pods or whatever are actually, they break apart because of fire, like lightning strike fires. So they now have like controlled fires to allow them to do this. But so that's what it reminded me of, like the outside element.
Right. Yeah,
So
that's a good example.
yeah, so it's kind of cool that they introduced that into the book. So
It's just a little weird that this fungus that in ants doesn't have this problem. It spreads its spores naturally, right? And it doesn't, like, kind of taking this from ants, which they get infected, they climb up to a tall tree, they get on the underside of a leaf and hold on with their pincers or whatever, and then the spore breaks through their
right.
exoskeleton and spreads, and that's it. Like that's the whole lifespan. And then, in theory, that has come and just jumped species into humans, but now it has a very different approach. It's a little. I mean, maybe I'm
Well,
being too pedantic.
they kind of, and this is one of the muddier parts of the book. They kind of indicate that maybe because it made the jump to humans, that it isn't quite, it's like a well-oiled machine with the ants, but with the humans, it's not necessarily perfect. The mechanism isn't perfect, but I thought that was a little bit of a cop out. So,
But
but
it does help the narrative, as I said.
it
Like,
does. It does. It's a little bit of a
yeah,
cheat, but still, that's a very minor criticism that I had.
yeah. Oh God, yeah. So I don't know. Like this story starts off narratively. You've got this big, fairly big compound, and then everything goes to shit. This other faction, the Junkers, who we never really learned much about.
Right.
There's nobody from their perspective in the narrative. But the way, I guess we know based on the way that the book goes that they're doomed.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe because of the way they just kind of do a scorched earth thing everywhere they go. But the thing is, they deal with the Hungries so much better than anybody apparently from Beacon even knows how.
Right. Which isn't. I wish that is one piece that I wish they had expanded on a little bit. I would have liked to have seen something from one of the Junkers' point of view, just to get a little bit more of a sense of what their existence was like.
Yeah.
And why it was so different, like why they were doing what they were doing. And I feel like that was one of the thinner plot points that could have used some expansion.
Yeah, like they can apparently operate with impunity outside the wire, and they just cover themselves in tar and drive around in really loud vehicles. And I guess they manage because they're in large numbers and well armed, but
right.
they
And they
don't.
also know the patterns of the Hungries too,
Yeah.
and are they take advantage of that, although not always successfully, because they can also get caught out too. So
True. The story that we hear from the perspective of Gallagher does kind of lay that out, that he accidentally gets a few of them killed, right?
right. Not, I mean, he would, and it was totally like he sort of stumbled into whatever they were doing, and by nature of what happened, because he caught them off guard as well, and basically led this group of Hungries into them, which just slaughtered them. But they would have been fine had he not messed up their own plans.
Yeah.
So,
And that's another thing. We never really learned what their motivation is to attack the military base.
yeah, that's what I mean. Like, I felt like there was
Yeah.
something that wasn't quite expanded upon there, that I felt like I needed to know a little bit of their motivation.
Yeah.
Did the military block them out and not allow them to join, and felt like they just needed to save certain people that had a certain skill set? Did they just choose to stay away from them, or what was the reasoning behind all this? And it even if a couple of their people had been killed because of this military person's blunder, I don't feel like that was enough motivation. Clearly they had been plotting that attack for a while.
Seems that way.
Like, I don't feel that was a motivation for them to attack the base. Like, maybe they just wanted the power and all of that, but that would have been a cool perspective to see in the book.
Yeah. It's also, I guess, kind of important to note that this is 20 years after what they call the breakdown. 20 years after the fungus has essentially taken over most of the land, and Beacon is kind of it. And there's this little base, and then there are apparently groups of gangs wandering around too. But 20 years, it's cool that it's a 20-year gap because they describe a lot of the landscape as like nature taking back over a lot of things. And that's a cool fact, or factor for the story, and the fact that the hungry, and it gives the narrative this element of like, okay, so now that the hungries have been infected for this long, and it takes 20 years for the fruiting element to be introduced,
Right?
Which is crazy.
Totally crazy.
Yeah.
But anyway, yeah. I don't know that I have too much more to say.
Yeah, I guess on the book, maybe we've talked about it enough, and we haven't. And I'm glad we haven't gone through and done a blow by blow. So we should probably just leave it there.
I think there's too much to go through to do a blow by blow. But I will.
True.
I did want to just say like a couple of one of the reasons that I really liked this book, despite hoping for a little bit of expansion. There was a lot of great detail in terms of moving the plot along. I did really enjoy the different descriptions, like, for example, the different reactions when Melanie and the sergeant and Justino are out in the wild, their interactions with the Hungries and the way that they learn a lot more about their behaviors. I thought that was cool, and just sort of the different things that tip them off to show you what the canon is in this book. I thought that was done very well. I did like the interaction between the characters and the different discoveries they make along the way. The revealing in this book was excellent, and the pacing I thought was really good. So,
True, yeah.
So 2 thumbs up from me, definitely.
Yeah, same here. And it also ends without any need for a sequel, right?
Agreed.
There's no, so it's like a one and done. It's kind of refreshing in a way, and I assume that they will not mess with the story of the movie, since Carrie wrote the screenplay, and just leave it at one movie. And I feel like it's good. It's a self-contained story that has, sure, there's stuff that there isn't explained, but that's so much better.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. And I like that they leave it. They don't explain to death everything. That's, one of the things that I don't like about, some of these books that have gone on and on forever, or these stories that go on and on forever, is the fact that they sort of do it to death.
Yeah.
And they don't leave any mystery, and they don't treat the audiences as if they're smart. This definitely treats the audience as if it's smart, and I really like that.
Yeah. So for the film, which is supposed to come out in 2016, they changed the name from The Girl with All the Gifts to She Who Brings Gifts. And I wonder, because the name of the book is supposedly a translation from the Greek for Pandora,
Right.
Which apparently means She Who Brings Gifts. But then, The Girl with All the Gifts. And
Right.
now the film name changed to She Who Brings Gifts. And I wonder if they just realized that his translation was incorrect, and they made it She Who Brings Gifts. I'm not sure why.
Maybe, but it's still a cool title or idea. Maybe there was another film that was too close to that title, or there may have been working project. That's my guess.
Or maybe it was too close to the girl with the dragon tattoos, and the Stieg Larsson people got.
Maybe that's true. Nice.
But so the cast that's been announced is pretty exciting. Or at least a few of them are. Some of them are unknowns, and that's cool because you've got a 10-year-old Melanie to cast, and it's hard to find established 10-year-old actresses. But probably the most exciting is Glenn Close as Carolyn Caldwell, and what a find, right? What a steal.
Well, it's interesting because I deliberately didn't look at the casting before I read the book. And then I didn't remind myself of it anyway. And then I was prepping for our show, and I was looking through the cast list, and that is exactly what I would picture Carolyn Caldwell to be like. I think Glenn Close can pull it off. Part of me was kind of picturing her as a little bit younger, maybe, but I feel like Glenn Close has enough of that gravitas, and she can pull off that sort of I don't want to call it coldness, but I think she can definitely pull this character off. I think it's going to be
Yeah,
good.
I'm sure she could. I had kind of also seen Sigourney Weaver
Oh, that could
being
be
able to
really
do
good.
this,
Yep.
but you know what? This is a great casting, so I'm happy about it. And then so yeah, Senia Nanua is the woman or the girl who's going to be playing Melanie, and as far as I can tell, it's going to be her first major film. She's done like a small project otherwise. A slight shift already from the book is casting Gemma Arterton as Miss Justineau. She's a
Right.
blonde or brunette. She's white, and Miss Justineau in the book is
And
black.
and you
So,
know what? That I'll admit that kind of annoyed me.
well, but I don't know. Do they make up for it in your eyes by casting Fiseo Akinade as Kieran Gallagher? Who Kieran Gallagher is about as a redheaded name as you can get, and he's a white redheaded guy in the book, and now he's
No,
gonna
they
be
don't. It doesn't make it up for it
doesn't make
for
up
me
for it.
because I feel like Justino is one of. She's probably to me. She's more of a major character,
Yeah, it's true.
and what an opportunity to have. There's seriously a dearth of diversity in a lot of the films that we're seeing today, and I
Yeah.
don't understand why they made this decision. I think that that's just stupid. But
They've also cast someone younger than Justineau is supposed to be. Justineau is supposed to be, I assume, 40 plus,
yep,
because she was an adult in the world before. So 20 years ago, she was already like graduating medical school or doing something because she has some backstory that comes up. But Archerton looks like she's 24 or something. Maybe she's a little older because she's been in movies for 10
yeah,
years.
but she does look very. She looks very young compared to what I had in my head. Because I mean, I feel like one of the things about Justino is that she has had all this experience. So you
Yeah.
kind of, not that you trust her a little bit more, but she's seen a lot and she's definitely been a part of this world for a while. And I don't know why you would. Well, I know why they would totally. I know why they would choose to put somebody into the role as a younger person. But that was a little disappointing too.
Yeah.
I don't know. I think that that like when we see what's been done with the character Michonne, I had some hopes for this particular character.
True.
But can't have it all, I suppose.
You can't have it all. So for whatever reason, that's the decision they made. I am cautiously optimistic about the casting for Sergeant Eddie Parks with Patty Considine,
Yep.
who we recognize. HA, I'm sure you are familiar with his work through the Cornetto trilogy.
Yep.
Beyond that, I'm not sure what else I've seen him in, but he's definitely done the Simon Pegg circuit.
Oh yes, he has. And also the director for this, Cole McCarthy. He's been involved in a lot of different things that I like. I don't know if you've watched Peaky Blinders at all, but it's a television series on the BBC right now. We've talked about it, right?
We've talked about it a few times. Yeah.
I thought so. I just couldn't remember. And then, of course, he's been involved with a lot of the shows that I personally love, like Ripper Street, Sherlock, Doctor Who, and that kind of thing. So this is, I don't know about directing films. I think this may be only his second film. So I think that this is going to be interesting to see. We may see it before the sequel to World War Z. Who knows? So I am looking forward to seeing this, and I do encourage everybody to read this book.
Yeah, most definitely. Hopefully, we've gotten across our enjoyment of it without, I don't know. And if you hadn't read the book before you listened to us, I'm sorry. We tried to warn you off. It's great though, and I'd be interested to hear what other influences people felt while they were reading it. Like I go through my list again. I had I Am Legend, the book, Day of the Dead, Screamers, Firewalker episode from the X-Files, and a little Andromeda strain thrown in too because of the weird not knowing who's getting affected and who's immune or partially immune, etc. Great stuff.
Good stuff.
And Lord of the Flies. Why not? Just throw it in that one too.
Yeah, sure. Why not? There's a little bit of that going on.
So thank you for listening to our review of The Girl with All the Gifts by M.R. Carey, the book. We will be definitely reviewing this movie after it comes out in 2016. Can't come soon enough. And we will be next time, hoping you will join us as we review the going back to Mars to review some zombies, because that's my favorite specialty. So next time, we hope you'll get together with us again as we go back to Mars for some more zombie action with Last Days on Mars. And AJ, have you seen that before?
I have not, so I'm looking forward to it.
Awesome. Okay, cool. Well, then we will be talking about that film the next time we get together. And in the meantime, you can get a hold of us at reanimatedpodcast@gmail.com, at reanimatedpcast on Twitter, and on our website at reanimatedpodcast.com.
Woo! Until next time, ciao.
Bye-bye, everybody.